Hello, everyone. This is Lala, and today I'm going to be talking about the 26th season of the challenge, which is called Battle of the Exes 2. So, first, I'm going to talk about my initial experience with this. I'm pretty sure I mentioned in a few of these videos that a friend of mine in 2014 really wanted me to watch the challenge. And this was around the time where I was actually watching the Real World, and this was the time where I only watched two of the seasons, which was the Real World Portland and the Real World was it no, was it Skeletons? The Real World Explosion. So those were the two seasons I watched, and then the friend wanted me to watch the challenge after that. But I never really got around to it. I didn't know at the time, but if I were to have started watching the challenge, it would have been when Battle of the Exes 2 was airing, so I do regret not watching it at the time. I watched it for the first time last year when I watched the earlier seasons that I missed since I started with Era 4, and I thought the season was somewhere in the upper to mid tier, but closer to the mid tier. The first three episodes were just really, really sad to watch, especially with DM's death, and I didn't find the gameplay to be the most interesting at that point in time. But as I started watching the season, I found myself getting a lot more interested in the gameplay and the stakes and the drama. But at the same time, I found it to be a bit too icky as well, so it kind of turned me off from it as well. That's why I was kind of mixed on the season, though I liked it more than I disliked it. My opinion on it now is I love this season. It is one of my favorites. And I made a mistake watching it from 30 backwards instead of season 1 forward up until now, where when I watched these seasons for the first time, I went backwards. But now that I went chronologically, I get so much more about the stakes and the interactions of the cast up until this point, which really elevates the season, in my opinion. And since Portland and Explosions were the only two World seasons that I watched, I understood a lot more of the dynamics with the rookies as well, and those pairings. I definitely really love the gameplay in the season, and I do think it's one of the most strategic and political seasons ever, and I love that. But there are many seasons of the challenge and just in reality TV that's very political and strategic, but it's missing the drama element. And there's a whole lot of that here. And I really liked it. I do think most of the exes fit the theme of the season, where I felt like in the first Exes, a lot of the pairings didn't really have any interesting dynamics or much dynamics whatsoever. And with the political game also being very boring on the first Exes, I didn't really care for it, especially during this latest rewatch, where I discussed that in that video. But this season, it elevated everything that an Exes theme was supposed to be. A lot of the pairings definitely were strong in the game. They definitely had very strong fights, arguments, and dynamics, though it got icky at a few points in times. And it really was the peak of the challenge when it comes to the drama, the format, though that was kind of especially with the Exile twist. But we would see stuff like that in a few more of the future seasons where it gets its importance in the evolution in that regard. This is also the first season to introduce people that weren't on an MTV show or Fresh Meat, where Are You the One made its debut here, and we'd get a lot more of them throughout late era 3, or essentially, we'd get a lot more of them debuting throughout the second half of this era, and a few sprinkles here and there through era 4. And you could definitely tell that they added Are You the One to the challenge because they knew the real world was coming closer and closer to the end. And I believe after this season, there was only two more real world seasons anyway, so they definitely knew that they needed to expand their casting pool. And I definitely don't feel like the Are You the One people that were cast on this season were the strongest challengers, and I definitely do think they'd get it correct in a few seasons after this. But it's an interesting addition, but it caused a whole lot of backlash at the time. But they did it for a reason, and I do think that a lot of the people who eventually became challenge. Sorry, a lot of people who eventually became challenge staples that came from either one proved to be successful, but they just really weren't the ones who debuted on this season. The cast is in Panama for the season. Sarah came in more determined than ever to win. Leeway talks about being poor in the water and talking about being a corn star. I'm wondering if this was in reference or a shade to Dustin. I don't really know. And CT talks about how he trimmed his beard from last season and he's stuck with DM as a partner. Sorry, he's stuck with DM again. I guess he didn't know she was a partner at the time that they were working in. The 9 rookies are brought in, and there's talk about Are You the One being introduced on the show, where the vets feel some sort of way about it. TJ announces that the theme of the season is Exes 2, so they are partnered with the Exes for the entire season. Jonay and Zach, as he randomly ditched her 2 years ago, which was talked about briefly on Rivals 2, and he mentions that she has no gag reflex, which, what an effing disgusting thing for him to say. Sarah and Jordan, due to their brief hookup on Rivals 2, Nanny and Bananas due to their secret off-camera fling, and apparently didn't happen on the show. Teresa and Wes due to their hookup on Fresh Meats 2 5 years ago, up until this point. Avery and Johnny, where she moved across the country for Johnny, and she supposedly cheated on him. And it's ironic how she moved across the country for another man a decade later, and there might have been cheating there too, but we'll get more into that later. Nia and Leroy, based on their hookup on last season, which was a great blowjob that they are both bragging about. Brittany and Adam from the Are You the One season, Jessica and Dustin, as they didn't pick up anything from last season, and she claims that his girlfriend started attacking her on social media. Jenna and Jay from Real World Skeletons, and they were exes before reality TV, where he cheated on her several times. Jamie and Knight from the Real World New Orleans season, Haley and Thomas from the Real World Skeletons, where they were also exes in real life from when they were teens, Simone and John from Are You the One, and DM and CT again. I get why they pair together, but I just really do not like repeated pairings. The losing team automatically goes into elimination, which has been a theme throughout all of Era 3 at this point, and the winning team becomes the power couple, where they send in another person to go into elimination. $250,000 is won for the winning pair, $75,000 for second, and $30,000 for third place. Dustin decides to room with the guys this season since he wants to make friends with them, and he hasn't had that chance with his other seasons. Jenna is speaking to Brittany about how hot her future husband is, who is like Thor, and Brittany ends up speaking to Jay about his feelings for Jenna, which will never change, according to Jay. Nanny and Bananas talk about how they ended up falling out, and he wants her to shut the fuck up at this point. DM speaks to Avery about how the latter does not talk to Johnny and she doesn't trust him, and Johnny mentions the same sentiments about Avery to the other guys, so they're clearly not on good terms, and there's a lot of resentment there. Zach is checking out his future wife's ass, and he has a very disgusting, or he's claiming that he has very, very, very disgusting thoughts about it. Wes is trying to get gossip from Jay and Jessica, and Jay messed around with Jessica in New York at some point, and he also ended up kissing Jimmy, though he is being slick with his answers, confirming it without outright stating it. Dustin asks Jessica about her supposed fling with Jay, and she shuts it down pretty quickly. I don't know why anyone cares so much about this. Dustin continues to ask Jessica about it, and she doesn't see why he is trying to outright embarrass her, and it's none of his business anyways, which I definitely do agree with. CT and DM are talking about their relationship, and DM speaks about how she had to remove her ovaries, so she needs to have a surrogate if she wants to have kids, and it's sad watching this, knowing what will happen to her not long after. They get to the first daily, which is in Panama City, and they are flown there, and they have to go across 2 tall buildings on a tightrope suspended 500 feet in the air, which is called I Got You, Babe. The woman is walking across it where the guy is hanging above trying to keep her balance. It is a decent enough daily, I will say, but I don't do heights like this in general, so it's just tough to watch in general. Adam and Brittany get last over Jemmy and Knight, with Wes and Teresa winning by 10 seconds over CT and DM. There is talk about the women regarding throwing Are You the One against one another since they are the rookies and they're from a new show, but Nanny and Sarah mentioned that Wes and Teresa are sketchy as hell and they can do anything. Teresa and Wes have a dinner, which is given to people who win the daily as a power couple, and Wes is thinking about sending in Johnny bananas, but Teresa wants to throw someone who won't be as mad, so she throws Dustin and Jessica out there, as she's aware that she's a poor politician, and I love the self-awareness from her in this regard. Wes speaks to Thomas and Jay, and he wants to work with the two and the other rookies, as he tells them that he's targeting a veteran. So I guess this is where the start of Wes's getting with the rookies strategy came to place. Wes speaks to Dustin and Jessica about how they are in contention to be thrown in, but Bananas is the other option. But he doesn't want to target the rookies, since they have more numbers right now. Dustin speaks about how he cannot get in good with the guys, no matter what he can do, and he thinks that it's because of his gay corn past, though he doesn't regret the opportunity which he worked with for 5 years, and I find it interesting that he doesn't regret it. He feels like he doesn't have a place in the challenge due to it, which says a lot, since many other people on the challenge now have pornographic accounts. Wes speaks to Bananas and mentions how the latter threw him in early on the Ruined, which is like 5 years at this point, or 5 years ago at this point, and Exes, which was 3 years ago at this point. And Bananas thinks that it is a dumb move, since there are so many other fodder teams that need to be dealt with first, and there's no need to start a war this early on. Wes and Teresa do end up choosing Jessica and Dustin because they're in the middle of being quote unquote old, so very tenured vets, and quote unquote young, i.e., rookies or second season people. Dustin feels more confident going into the elimination, and the two of them are in a better place as a team, as Jessica and Dustin had that really nice conversation. And we see Adam and Brittany kind of hyping one another up to get ready for the elimination. The pairs are playing in pole position, where they have to use the poles on their hands and feet to climb the wall, and they ring the bell at the top. It seems like Dustin and Jessica are going to win, but the rookies do end up beating them after Jessica leaned back, causing them to fall. Nanny is sad that her friend was not able to catch traction, and we see the cast go to the club. The end of the episode shows Dustin and Jessica being taken to exile, where it is the first redemption house. But unlike Dirty 30 or Final Reckoning, they don't actually show it on the episodes. And this was where they're trying to show exclusive clips on their website, and I believe the exclusive clips pertaining redemption is or exile is gone. So you can't even see them anymore. They're kind of like lost media at this point. Honestly, it's kind of sad watching Dustin not catch on after his big season on Battle of the Seasons and feeling isolated, though I don't know if he helped himself in the relationship department, especially with the guys. It just shows how one wrong decision or one rejection on the challenge can do some major damage, and he lost the momentum. Maybe he will be on All Stars one day, but other than that, I do think he's done with the show. And Jessica is essentially following Dustin's same trajectory, with her having a good second season, a poor first season, and a poor third season, which will continue into her last season. I don't know why people cared so much about her and Jay, which didn't lead to anything interesting anyways, but at least she and Dustin got some closure, and based on the redemption charts that I see on the wiki, they were the second booted for good, as they beat Haley and Thomas in exile, but they didn't show it. Next episode starts in a bar, which will pretty much be damn near every episode this season starting in the bar. But here we have Zach and Jenna getting close to one another, and she really likes that Zach looks like Thor. Jonay and Jay are watching them flirt, and it's a very awkward situation overall. Avery is watching Johnny flirt with Nani, despite their thing last season, or especially because of their thing last season, and Avery is ranting to Jordan about Johnny, and he's essentially telling her to get over it and to stop talking about it since she needs to get her head in the game. Avery is salty about him hooking up with Nani last season, despite them already being broken up, and she's crying about it to Teresa and Jay. Johnny doesn't care about Avery crying about it, and the guys are talking about how she needs to own that she cheated on her boyfriend, and the guys are not falling for it. I know Avery would later, like in more recent years, talk about how much the cast, especially the guys, really didn't like her, and it kind of made her feel awkward, but the situation is just very, very messy. The cast cheers on Ken and Barbie, which is Zach and Jenna, to kiss, and Jonay tells Nanny about how the situation is really bothering her, where Nanny is giving her good advice, and it's nice to see that they've remained friends after rivals too. We then move on to Nia and Teresa talking about how many people Nanny slept with, and they call her all types of sluts and whores. Rounding the bases is the daily where they have to hold a card between their lips, but when they get to a bowl, they have to suck or blow to get through it. And I find this to be a pretty simplistic but strong daily as well, testing the boundaries within the couples and pairs. Jamie regrets not hooking up with Leroy on Rivals 2, since he would have been her partner instead. Johnny and Avery are automatically going into the elimination for getting last here, and the second round is to unscrew balls from a pole slash baseball bat and to put it into some sort of hole or whatever. The third base round involves them using their tongues to lick peanut butter off some sort of board to reveal the numbers needed. And the fourth round is home base, where they have to insert poles into one another, where Bananas and Nanny win the daily over Wes and Teresa. They have their power couple dinner and they talk about how they want to send home Teresa and Wes, and Nanny especially is pushing this. But Bananas doesn't believe that Avery will beat Teresa, and Johnny Riley has never been in an elimination, so he's unproven as well. He mentions that she was close to Teresa last season, and Nanny knows that Teresa talks about her. The two pairs talk, and there is some banter between Wes and Bananas, and Nanny outright confronts Teresa about talking about her, and Teresa mentions that Nanny doesn't respect herself, especially regarding her interactions with Johnny Riley, though Nanny doesn't see how that is relevant. Though it's clear that Teresa's kind of just siding with Avery in the situation. Nanny now realizes that she was done for defending Teresa last season, where everyone hated her, and the two of them continue to go at it, where Teresa doesn't apologize since she doesn't mean it, and it would be stupid to give a fake, meaningless apology. Jay is talking to CT about Zach massaging and putting sunscreen on Jenna, and he kinda just has to deal with it. Bananas and Nanny send in Haley and Thomas as the other opponent, since they are still rookies. CT is training Johnny Riley on how to do the dom, and there's so much tension between Riley and Avery, who is also in the same room. CT is told that DM is not doing well at all by Teresa, and she's on her bed feeling a lot of pain, and you see pills next to her bed, as she thinks that it is the peanut butter making her sick. Banded together is the elimination, where they're literally banded together, and whenever one person moves up to grab the pole or whatever at the end, the other person is held back, so they have to find a way to make it across, and this is a tough slash fun elimination. Despite everything, Johnny and Avery do beat Haley and Thomas, despite her calling him baby in the elimination, so there's clearly some unresolved feelings on Avery's end. After the elimination, DM mentions that she is somewhat feeling better, but she wants CT to go to the club, and it's interesting how they pick and choose who is allowed to go to the club and who's allowed to stay, as quite a few challengers talk about this throughout the years. Nanny approaches Avery about apologizing regarding the Johnny situation, and Avery thinks that this is a disingenuous apology, and it's weird for her to approach her about this right after Avery won an elimination, and Avery really isn't handling the situation well, in my opinion. But Nanny is definitely holding back, and honestly, I do have to give her props for this. Jenna and Zach are talking, and he is shocked with how, not smart Jenna is, with Jay and Janae deciding to make Jenna and Zach jealous by kissing. Haley really didn't do much of anything on the season, and I don't really have anything to say about her. So it is a surprise that she never came back, since she's not a good performer and didn't have much of a personality or a story. Thomas himself was also just there as well, and I think it's because their dynamic is a lot more calm and stable in comparison, due to them knowing one another since high school and them working through their issues well beforehand. And if we are including Excel, they're technically the first couple booted. But based on this, it is shocking that Thomas got a few more chances, and people who are a lot more memorable and that were rookies on the season didn't get that chance. Everyone but DM is at the club, and Johnny and Avery go back to ignoring one another when they aren't competing. But the producers tell CT when they come back that she was rushed to the hospital. He is insistent on leaving, and the producers want to hold him back since he was drinking, and it isn't very good. He is arguing with the producers and he is freaking out since he wants to be there with her, and the producer is able to get DM on the phone, where she insists that she is fine and she'll be back in an hour. DM does return and CT ushers her back in her bed, but we see her in pain in the next morning when he checks in on her. The cast is talking about her condition and they are very worried, and I can only imagine how horrendous this was watching and experiencing this live. Anyways, The producers decide to take DM to the hospital yet again, so I don't even know if she was back in the house for 12 hours. He is carrying the wailing woman to the car, and it's just a really sad scene to watch in so many ways. So, the cast decides to give DM a bunch of arts and craft messages for her when she returns, which CT does lead, and it's a very nice moment where all of them bonded and they had this common goal for something good. Unfortunately, she will never get to see it, or at least in the house, as Sichi comes into the house where he announces that DM is disqualified due to her medical issues and that CT has to leave as well, though CT would have quit anyways, which he made clear, so he is fine with it. CT isn't used to leaving this early outside of punching someone in the face, which we saw in Era 2, and many other women are packing her stuff. We then, we then see footage of her getting wheeled to the Panama airport and arriving to New York as she's still being wheeled. And then her final confessional, which was clearly filmed before she got ill again, but her final confessional was talking about life throwing you in for a loop and all this other stuff, and it's just really, gosh, I'm starting to somewhat tear up again. It's awful to watch. So it's clear that CT and DM were back together when the season started, and when you read up on how she passed away a few months after she was pulled, was just really sad to watch. She fought so hard, and the show was a distraction to her and gave her another purpose outside of what she was going through, and watching her slowly die really was just heart-wrenching. CT was funny and likable in the bit that we did see of him that wasn't relating to DM sickness, and you really do feel for him regarding the entire situation as well. He was by her side during her final few months and on her deathbed, and he apparently proposed to her, which she rejected because she saw it as him having pity for her, and she wanted them to celebrate and not mourn and get sad over her death while she was dying. Rest in eternal peace to DM and F. Cancer. The game continues on as On Again, Off Again is the daily, where they have to hold onto a zip line above the water that spins into a circular fashion by the wheel that they are holding, and it almost snaps Teresa's finger, so ugh. John and Simone get last over Leroy and Nair, mainly due to Simone, so they are going into elimination, and what am I reading here? Oh, sorry. My bad. So they have to spin around and then they have to swim back. That's the main purpose of the challenge. Zach and Janae are bickering before the challenge, where she thinks that he's being sarcastic and he claims that he does believe in her, but it's all just awkward. And as we all know later on in the season, he clearly didn't and doesn't believe in her. Jordan and Sarah beat Wes and Teresa by 3 seconds. Sarah and Jordan talk about how they know that Wes and Johnny are going to take one another out, but Jordan wants to keep bananas for the final, where their relationship has improved since last season, where Sarah is seeing this as chess, where she is seeing many steps ahead, and this is clearly put in the edits due to her winning, and they wanted to give her some sort of winner edit. They do speak to Wes, and they agree to work together, and are their number ones. Sarah speaks to Johnny about how she feels like they are lower on the totem pole, where Johnny assures her that she is his closest girlfriend, so Sarah and Jordan are just playing in the middle. They send in Adam and Brittany since they use Are You the One against them, and they want Are You the One facing one another in elimination. And Brittany tells the others that she doesn't care if Adam hooks up with someone else, where Jenna and Journey think that she is kind of full of it and they're calling her bluff. The elimination is He Said, She Said, where they have to dare one another to eat food within a 30-second time frame, and they have to bet on how much they can eat in that period of time, and to bet higher. It's rare for an eating challenge to be in elimination, but I did enjoy watching it, so I did find it to be pretty fun. Adam and Brittany agree not only Adam and Brittany agree to not fight after beating Simone and John in the elimination. Though it was a pretty close elimination. I really have nothing to say about John and Simone on this season. I do remember their interactions on Are You the One when I watched it like 6 years ago, and their dynamic there, but none of that was brought on to the challenge. They performed poorly, her in the final challenge and him in the elimination, and that was really that. They did win a few Exes apparently, though one of the opponents left due to the injury, just based on the chart that I looked up on the wiki. I am shocked Simone got a few more chances after this, though she got cast on Rivals Day due to an unseen fight with Comets, which I don't know if was in the actual house or in the Exile house. But John clearly was not a good choice for the show, so him being a one season wonder is fitting. Adam and Brittany are dancing and making out with one another in the club, and everyone is just cackling at their messiness. Jonay and Jay are dancing, and they're starting to flirt solely to piss Zach and Jenna off, though I don't think it ends up working since Zach literally gives Jay the thumbs up, so he clearly doesn't care. And then we move on to seeing Jenna and Zach kissing and Jay and Jonay kissing, where Zach outright admits that he swapped girls with Jay. Nanny does vent to Janae about how she'll never be anything with bananas, and she apparently blew it regarding their tryst with one another. On the limo ride back, Adam and Brittany are flirting, and Jimmy gets caught out in the confessional for doing something in the confessional by the producer. And it seems like she was giving Leeway a blowjob in the limo. Adam knows that he opened the floodgates for Brittany to get engaged in them hooking up, though he knows that it really isn't a good recipe, which was the case on their Are You the One season. Sarah reports this to Brittany and she calls Adam out for making the first move but claiming that she is the one that's clingy, and a lot of guys just do this. But he tells her to stop and is acting like she is crazy. Yeah, it's just whatever. The brush off is the daily, where they have to pass paint off to one another as they have to dip themselves into paint, go through an obstacle, transfer the paint to the men, and the men have to jump on a bag to smother the squares on it with paint. This was very similar to the daily that was done on the first Exes, but with some changes, and it is very good. Zach thinks that Janae has been piss poor in every daily so far, but they did very good here. Zach and Janae end up winning the daily over Jordan and Sarah. Knight and Jemmy are dead last over Wes and Teresa, where Zach tells Janae that he wants to speak with Knight and Jemmy, since Knight is his friend, and he tells them that he does not want to ruffle feathers. Knight wants to face Bananas, but Janae tells him that one of the rookies are going to be thrown in against them. And they're essentially giving the Exes options as to which newbies that they want to face. Janae and Zach then speak to Jay and Jenna, and there's a bunch of awkward names pretending they're weird. Square or rectangle. And Janae tells Zach that they don't ever talk, and he thinks that she still has feelings for him, but he apologizes for cutting her out in their real life. It does seem like at this point, emphasis on at this point, they are becoming friends and they're clearing the air, which unfortunately does not last. Janae speaks to Nanny and the latter speaks to Janae about how he has someone back home and is really messing with her head. Sorry, the he I'm referring to is Bananas, where Janae is telling Nanny to not think about Bananas at all. Adam talks about his stripping story, and Wes tells him to strip for the girls, and he does a nice lap dance to Nia, Avery, and the sister Janae in hopes that he wouldn't get thrown in, and he does it to a bunch of the women in the house, where he's face down, ass up, and shaking it like he just don't care. So, the guys end up giving him his man card after this. Adam speaks to Janae about if he wins this one, will he go in again? And she mentions that she was voted in over and over again on her rookie season, so he most likely will. Janae speaks to Zach about how they need to vote in Jenna and Jay because Adam and Brittany will go after them if they win, and he hinted this. And Zach thinks that she is doing this because she does not want Jenna in the house and is just outright jealous. Despite all the hoopla hopla, they do throw in Adam and Brittany for the third time, and technically the second consecutive time since they were just in last round. Zach gives some stupid answers about statistics, and Zach also rants about Janae. He rants about Janae having no confidence and how she walks in hearing everything Zach said, as he was complaining about this to, I believe, Johnny Riley and Jordan, if I remember correctly. Anyways, she's over this and she is tired about the bunch of guys bitching about her or enabling Zach. And she ends up bawling in her confessionals about the entire situation with Zach. And honestly, it's just very sad to watch. We have a bunch of guys talk to Bananas regarding his conversations with his girlfriend, and they're kind of just like mocking it. And Nani is very annoyed about it, as she's also in the room. Bananas and Nani end up arguing because she does not want to work out with him, like gym wise, and Nani calls Bananas the worst, where he tells her that at least he isn't emotionally abusive like Zach. So the fact that he's outright stating this clearly shows that this is something that was talked about amongst the house. Anyways, the elimination is breaking it up, where they have to pull a rope, which has a surface that would break through like 3 rows of blocks, and Adam and Brittany dominate the elimination over Jemmy and Knight, who has a pathetic performance here. Despite that, it does seem like Knight and Jemmy are becoming friends on, friends in their real life, and from the experience that the season gave them. And the episode ends with Nelly crying to Bananas over their weird dynamic. So neither one of them did really much in the season, though I will say that this was the least annoyed I ever was of Knight on the challenge, and he was tolerable this season. Jemmy did have that hookup with Leeway on the bus, but I don't remember a whole lot else that she did on the season either. And I think it's because they are forced to work together on seasons, and we had a bit more of them on Rivals 2. There really wasn't much to develop with them pertaining their dynamic on the show. Of course, I have to say rest in peace tonight, since he apparently OD'd a few months after the season finished filming, and it's really sad that he couldn't get over his demons. I really don't blame Jemmy for taking a few seasons off after this, since her experience on the show was tied so much to Night, so with him gone, obviously she needed some time to regroup. But her comeback will definitely be pretty interesting. We start the episode at the club, and Bananas is talking to Zach about Wes not liking him, and always holding resentment towards him, and their truce is essentially over at this point, though Zach doesn't care to be recruited by Bananas. Apparently, there was a bet the night before where Naya would drink a glass of sweat to give, or to get money, and she ends up drinking Zach's sweat that he wrung out from his shirt, where he was literally just working out with Johnny Riley. I could have gone a lifetime and an after lifetime never seeing this. Open Arms is the daily where the guy and the girl will both be on a zip line, but the man will be on a surfboard and the woman will be holding onto a punching bag where they decide to jump into the lake to swim back, where I thought this daily was pretty boring, to be honest. Zach does not do Bananas' wishes to choose West first or second. That would cause West to have a higher chance of losing, and that lights Bananas up. Leroy and Naya get last over Jay and Jenna, and Wes and Teresa beat Jordan and Sarah by less than 2 seconds. Wes is looking forward to making a big move, and Bananas is frustrated because Zach essentially handed Wes a win. Zach does spill everything to Wes during the dinner date, and they agree to work together, but to not tell anyone. Wes and Teresa easily nominate Bananas and Annie, with them breaking up the mess with one another. Bananas confronts Teresa about who said it, and she mentions that several people told her about it, but he knows that it was only Zach, who was the only person Bananas actually told about it. Nanny calls Teresa a coward ass bitch since she is pissed off about being nominated, and Teresa makes it very clear that she doesn't give a single shit about Nani. We then move on to Nia and Avery slut shaming Nani, calls her a bunch of hoes, and they don't respect her. And then Naya calls her a Groupon hoe, and they think that Nani lashing out at the ceremony proves that she's just scared and intimidated. Honestly, both Avery and Nia are hypocritical in this situation, since Avery has been accused of being in a few affairs, one in the season with cheating on Johnny Riley with the boyfriend she was dating at the time, and currently, or at least sometime this year as I'm recording it, was accused of being the other woman with Adam on All Stars 4 that was edited out, where he had a girlfriend on that season, and the timeline is very fuzzy. So she's hypocritical here. And regarding Nia, she will act so much worse than Nani does in a few episodes when she is the one that's nominated. So hearing her complain on and on and on and on about Nani being the poor sport and all that, only to do 100 times worse, is just ridiculous. So, anyways, Jay is literally just standing there watching the Sorry, it's not Jay. Adam is standing there just watching the two of them go on, and he really doesn't have any sort of reaction. Oh, and there's also some speculation that Adam Zun, I think his last name is, Adam Kun, not Adam Larson, Adam Kun and Avery were also very inappropriately close this season, so I just find it to be very ironic. Anyways, I'm moving on from that. Bananas lashes out at Zack for sabotaging him with the order, and Zack mentions that it isn't his fault that Bananas did poorly in the daily, and Zack denies telling him, though Bananas knows that he is full of shit, but Zack is proud to not play Bananas' game. Bananas calls out Zack for playing all sides, and he justifies it by claiming that he did it because his partner Jonay cannot swim, so way to throw her under the bus to excuse your bullshit, Zack. Zack mentions that he was never going to say Bananas' name, but Bananas wants a ride or die soldier who will fall on the sword for him, so essentially a Leroy. Zack is ranting to Jordan and Riley about Bananas acting like a baby, and Jonay approaches him to comfort him, but he tells her to shut up and go away. She tells him that he has no right to speak to her like that before walking off, and he claims that she has no right to speak to him in general. Wes is very proud of getting two BFFs to go against one another, as Bananas mentions that Wes hates Leroy, and I kind of forgot about that regarding Rivals too. And Wes is cheering that he got his wish, and he's just very arrogant with it as well, but we all know Wes is a poor winner. The two pairs get ready to play in the elimination, which ends up being strung out, where they are tied to their hands and feet, but they have to go across a bamboo stick that is tied up and to ring the bell. As we all know, this will become Leroy's signature elimination, and we know that he does it again later on in his career. So it's no shock that he and Naya win against Bananas and Nanny. Wes and Teresa are being obnoxious with the celebration of it. So I didn't know if I should write about Bananas and Nanny here or just wait until they're eliminated for good. But compared to Dirty 30 and Final Reckoning, where we actually saw the people in Exile or Redemption throughout the episodes even after they're eliminated, that wasn't the case for Bananas and Nanny. And we won't see them again until they come back. So I do think that makes a difference. Anyways, Bananas and Nanny's off-camera situation was relatively interesting, though it seems pretty similar to what happened with him and Camilla, and I know this will come up again with Bananas and Nanny in Rivals 3, if I remember correctly. And I did find their conflicts with Wes and Teresa, and even with one another at this point, to be very entertaining. Nanny was slut-shamed by a lot of the other women in the house, and a part of me does feel bad, but she has slut-shamed people in the past and will do so in the future. Everyone but Leroy is happy that Bananas is gone, and Adam is really feeling Avery, despite her having a boyfriend. Avery really likes her Adams, as she's literally dating Adam Larson as I'm speaking, and she apparently got inappropriately close with Adam Khan on the season 2, which was talked about on other outlets. Johnny Riley is trying to tell Adam to back away from Avery as she will stab him in the back, and Jay ends up telling Avery this, which pisses her off. Leroy and Naya are very confident about their plays, and it's the same with Sarah and Jordan, as they know that they can beat everyone. Don't Forget About Me is the daily where they have to hold on a door by pulling a rope, and their partner has to study a pattern where they carry a bag to place the puzzle based on the pattern on a board, and it's a relatively decent daily. This is also the first mini final, if my memory is serving me correctly, that was ever done on the show. Wes and Teresa win yet another daily, and Zack is snapping at Jonay for not memorizing the puzzle wall, as she tells him that she wants to quit to get away from him. And there was a point in time where Sarah and Jordan's pieces was taken by Leroy and Nanny, and he was also pissed off with her performance as well, as she's throwing up at some point in time. Because it's literally about to turn into the sunlight, the last people out of Johnny and Avery, Jay and Jenna, Jonay and Zach, and Brittany and Adam. So, out of those four, whoever has the least pieces will go into elimination. Adam and Brittany get last over Johnny and Zach, which shocks the latter, and Wes and Teresa talk about how they want to send in Johnny and Avery, because they are one of the more connected people in the house. I'm assuming because they are from the real world Portland, and Zach also being close to Riley. Teresa and Wes are speaking to Avery about going in due to them being the second fastest in the challenge, and due to Riley being aligned with Bananas, and Teresa feels bad since she and Avery are apparently friends. Avery speaks to Johnny about why they are going in, and she mentions that they told her that it is mainly due to him, which is why they are going in. He claims that she is playing the victim and is turning things around to make it all about him, and to make it all on him. And somehow Nani comes up in this conversation. She mentions that he is not Johnny anymore, but it's just Riley. And he claims that she has no right to call him that because she never got to know the real him. They then start arguing about their relationship, and it's just really, really messy. All of this was a part of Wes's plan, apparently, to make it harder for Johnny and Avery to work together, and it's clear that they are the ones that are next on his hit list. And once you have to stay with your partner, it's harder for you to work with them. Anyways, Adam and Brittany have a stupid argument about her drinking water, but we do move on to the elimination. And the elimination is stacking up, where they have to stack a bunch of plastic boxes together and then stand on it to ring the bell. And honestly, this elimination was kind of lame in my opinion. Wes is literally trying to help Adam and Brittany, but Johnny and Avery do beat them. I have no idea why Adam and Brittany never came back after the season. Their dynamic was so fun in this season, and they won 3 eliminations as rookies, so they could hold their own in eliminations, despite Brittany not being very good in the dailies. Apparently, Brittany was going to be on Bloodlines, but her brother pissed off some of the producers, so they were dropped, and she never came back. And Adam was apparently supposed to be at Invasion, but the producers got mad that he chose to do Are You the One Second Chances instead of this, which is odd because I believe Devin did the same thing, but they allowed him to come back, and there are people who did that show first over the challenge that eventually made it onto the challenge, like Tori and Asa. So I just found that to be pretty weird. They were a fresh newbie pairing who should have been back more and had some personality, but I think them being a bit too tied to one another and not really having much individualism hurt them. And I also do think the theme of Bloodlines next season and Rivals 3 being cast solely or mainly around the Bloodlines dynamics hurt them as well. Sarah rants to Nia about how Jordan has not said a nice word to her throughout the entire season, and they both mention how he's just an unhappy, miserable person with an inferiority complex. Jordan recognizes that he has been cranky and is speaking with Johnny and Zach, but he doesn't appreciate Sarah making M come off like the devil. We have arguably the most misogynistic conversation in the challenge history, which says a lot since Era 2 with JEK was horrendous, where Zach mentions the Adam and Eve analogy and starts to mention that women were made for, where Johnny Riley intervenes to finish the sentence, stating that women were meant to procreate. Zach then continues to state that the women are. Jordan interferes and says that the women are inferior to men. Zach then calls all the women swamp donkeys, rants about Janae sucking, and why men are the superior species. All the men are completely horrid in this, and the two of their explanations in the reunion, Johnny wasn't invited to the reunion, was even worse in my opinion, but I'll get to that later. Are You the One, ironically, is the daily where the couple will be wrapped above water and they have to answer a bunch of trivia questions or else they'll be dropped in the water. We've seen this daily several times before and after this, and we see Jordan and Sarah arguing before the challenge as he got annoyed with her being happy for a trivia, and Jordan's just showing his ass here, and he's just so unlikable. I don't know why he never gets the same smoke as Zach or even Johnny Bananas does when he makes similar comments and sentiments as they have about women, and just their treatment. Johnny and Avery are going to the dome for getting last, and we see Jordan rejecting a deal with Jay as they are the final 2 pairs in the challenge. And they would have protected Jordan and Sarah if they won, but Jordan wants to protect Johnny Riley. And I guess that makes sense since they're from the same reward season. And it's crazy that Wes was able to predict what ended up happening with the final 2 pairs before it ends up happening. Anyways, Jay and Jenna end up winning the daily, and Jordan is annoyed for losing. Since he and Sarah are trivia kings and queens, and she's going to use her social game to avoid being pitted against his friend Johnny. And Jordan feels bad because that's something that he should have won. We see Jordan walking away from Sarah while they're doing their joint confessional, and she's just pissed off at him. Sarah wants to speak to Jordan and tell him to apologize to a bunch of people for his behavior, where he knows that he's going to just shut up, but he's annoyed that he lost something that he should have won. She also mentions that his mood in crossing his arms around people is the same as telling people off, and she mentions that if he wasn't her partner, she would have voted him in as well. Jay tells Nia and Leroy that they are going in after speaking with Jordan, and they mention that Jordan, Johnny, and Zach are going to throw them in as soon as they can, and they're not his friends. So Nia and Leroy see these as a punk move to not take it to the big three, and they have their sights on the rookies. We see Jay and Jonah make out with one another while Zach and Jenna are cuddling, but we do see Jay and Jenna nominate Leroy and Naya. Hooking up is the elimination, where they have to grab a hook to attach it to their opponent while trying to prevent getting hooked. Leroy hooks Johnny relatively easily, but it's definitely a struggle between Naya and Avery, and it's ironic since they got into a full-out brawl on their real season and now have to get physical despite them not being friends, and I guess this just shows how evenly matched they are, despite Nia being taller. They are going at it for over an hour, and Leroy is hyping Nia up by kind of just shit talking, which I find to be very hilarious. And it literally ends up taking an hour and a half for this to finish, but Nia finally hooks Avery. Jay and Jenna know that having Leroy and Naya back in the house isn't good for them, and Leroy is tired of Naya not having any fight in her, which he is talking about with the guys, and it's crazy how this hasn't changed in Battle of the Eras, which filmed a decade after this. Johnny and Avery was not the most comfortable pairing to watch, as you can tell that he had a lot of disdain for her, and she grew to have a lot of disdain for him as well, but they did have history and they fit the theme of the season very well. Johnny definitely became more misogynistic and miserable this season, and Avery was pressed about his fling with Nanny, slut-shaming her as well, while she was dating the man that she supposedly cheated on Johnny with, and is currently with Adam, where the timeline for that is very messy, but I'll talk about that when we eventually get there. Overall, they weren't duds in the season, so I'll give them that, though they are winding down regarding their time on the show. There are 5 pairings left, and Leroy is proud of Naya now, and they realize that a lot of people do not want them in the house, but they're really hyping one another up now. Nia has to give Zach a pep talk in how to make Jonay a better performer, but making her feel great, or by making her feel great. Then she does a 180 by telling him that his girlfriend Jenna is out of here if she has anything to do with it, since they made such a bitch ass move, and Zach has absolutely nothing to say. And I do think this kind of shows that Zach kind of picks and chooses which girls to go in on or to have an attitude with, despite literally Nia bashing his future wife and the mother of his kids. Sarah and Jordan have a lot of tension, and she complains about it to Teresa and Naya, but she does make the first move to apologize by writing a note to him while she is crying over it. And honestly, I just find this all so ridiculous. But we do hear Sarah talk about how she has done so many seasons without a win, and this is clearly the same edits that Paula got on the first Rivals. But Jordan reads her note, and he gives her a nice hug, so things are good with him. Speed dating is a daily where they have to move from one moving truck to another to grab a ball and deposit the ball in the wall, going back to the other truck where they have to alternate by gender. We have seen many dailies like this after this, but it's a solid one, and I think it's the first one of its kind as well, chronologically. Zach throws a huge tantrum towards Journey, despite her not even doing poorly in the daily, and it's just really awful to watch, since he thought that she DQ'd them, but he did all that for nothing, since they weren't even DQ'd. Jordan and Sarah end up getting DQ'd, so they're going right to elimination, and Jack and Janae would have won the daily, which made his behavior even worse, but he jumped when he wasn't supposed to, so Leroy and Naya are the power couple. Zach explains to Janae about his anger, and he mentions that he yells because that is how he communicates. That's not a brag. And he mentions that it isn't fair to her, but he wants her to speak or else he's just going to walk off, which lovely. She mentions that everything isn't her fault and how she is a good partner, but she ends up ranting to the woman about how she never wants to speak to Zach again, telling his future wife about how poor of a person he is. Naya is letting Leroy take the reins, despite him being poor at politics, but he tells Zach and Janae that they are essentially going in. No, sorry. This happens before. He tells Jack and Janae that they are safe in elimination before what ends up happening. But after they speak to the scared Jay and Jenna, they change their mind about targeting Zach and Janae. Then Yui mentions to Wes about how he could just send him, i.e. Wes, in, but Weston sells his number one, Zach, under the bus so Leroy can do his dirty work. So if Leroy wants to be his number one, he has to cut Zach. But everyone is going to target Leroy and Nia, or at least that's what Wes is telling them. Essentially, Wes is getting Nia and Leroy to do his dirty work. But if they're set in against Jordan and Sarah, he is still going to work with Zach. So Wes kind of just showed his cards here, and Leroy just bought it for whatever reason. Nia and Leroy then tells Zach that Leroy has changed his mind and jumped the gun, but he and Janae are going in, where Leroy mentions that Zach was supposed to win the daily, but he didn't, and Zach threatens them, saying that if he comes back, he is definitely going after them. Nia and Leroy do send in Janae and Zach. Leroy and Nia are offended and galled that Jay and Jenna didn't say a damn thing to them after saving their asses, and they should be on their knees begging and thanking them. It's ridiculous. The elimination is hammer at home, where they have to hammer a piece to move onto a certain point, and they are facing their opponents of the same gender. It can be assumed that Thor Zack can beat the one-handed Jordan, but it doesn't turn out like that, since Jordan is using more efficiency and more technique. Sarah and Jordan do beat Zack and Janae, and the episode ends with TJ talking about the Excel twist. It was very uncomfortable watching Zack and Janae throughout the season. We knew about their history going back to Rivals 2, regarding their breakup, but they delved into a lot more this season, and his lack of accountability for anything, and blaming her for everything, even when he screws up, and his misogyny was just repulsive to watch. I definitely do think he behaved worse here than he did on Battle of the Season 2. Jordan definitely had a more memorable and a stronger season here compared to the last few, which kind of sucks that she stopped the show after this, or at least for a while, but she seems so exhausted, and I don't blame her for moving on from the show at this point in time. But of course, also changed her trajectory, which we'll delve into sooner or later. Even Zach took a few seasons off after this. I know she was on his podcast about a month or two ago, where she reached out to him and they had a sincere conversation about the season, so it is behind them. The house is celebrating at the club being the final four teams, and I swear every episode this season starts with a club scene. But we do see Leroy and Wes agree to go to the finals together. Wes's plan is to rally up the other two pairs to take out the layup rookies, i.e. Jay and Jenna. So they would be the easy last boots of the season. Sarah tells Jordan the plan to target Jay and Jenna, but Jordan really isn't feeling it much, bringing up the fact that it's a last-ditch effort since Teresa isn't good in elimination and she has a shitty record, and Sarah really isn't buying the plan much either. Jordan tells Wes that he rejects the plan since it doesn't make much sense for him, where Wes mentions that he will be pissed off if he goes in against Jordan or Leroy, when they could have gotten rid of the layup. The West mentions that he kept Jenna and Jay around for this exact reason, to take them out in the final elimination. So, essentially, what everyone does with Josh in the Era 4 seasons. Jordan mentions that Teresa is a bigger bitch than he is an asshole, and Jordan is referring to himself, and she's the only woman who can compete with Sarah when it comes to the running. Wes complains about this to Teresa and Sarah, and she then reports it back to Jordan, since Teresa is crying about this. And didn't she and Jordan get into a huge screaming match on Rivals 2? She should have just expected this from Jordan. Anyways, Jordan does not appreciate Wes twisting his words, and I don't think Wes did, to be honest, but Jordan does end up confronting Wes here, and it's a very fun confrontation. Essentially, Wes doesn't take back any of his words, and the two of them continue arguing, and Wes mentions that he's the only one who can win, and is the only one who has won, while Jordan mentions that Wes isn't the same roided Wes that he was in the past, and I found that to be a very good dig. And he can't win now. The Wes winning Rivals 2 was literally a year ago, so yeah, moot point for Jordan, I guess. West calls out Jordan for claiming that he did steroids, which he denies, and Jordan is really pissed off about West twisting his words with Teresa, and Jordan ends up selling out West's plan to send him home. And I believe he tells Jay this, if I remember correctly. TJ tells all of them to go back to the dome, and they see Johnny and Nanny, who won a bunch of exiles against Simone and John, Adam and Brittany, and Johnny and Avery, and Janae and Zach, who are shocked by the Excel twist themselves. Anyways, it's a not so fast where they have to create as many knots as possible, and then the other team will have to untie the knots, knowing the other team made it. Obviously, Leeway wants Bananas back, and Jordan wants Bananas back, due to them having the same enemy in the West. Ultimately, Bananas and Annie win their way back to the house, and I've already talked about Journey and Zach overall, who worked together well during this exile, so I'm going to just move on. Wes and Teresa know that they're essentially screwed. Jordan and Sarah know that they aren't going to be thrown into elimination every time now, which is what they assumed before this exile happened. And Leroy tells Johnny that he is now working with Wes, though Johnny thinks that Leroy is being dumb for working with the snake, and Bananas tells him that he will not be working with Wes, and Leroy essentially follows John's commands. Wes approaches Johnny, claiming to say congratulations, and Johnny essentially tells him to fuck off, essentially, and he doesn't really buy it. Naya is telling Sarah that they will have to send Leroy and Naya in to take out Wes and Teresa, and Bananas is fine with it, as long as he does not do the challenge himself. Or he doesn't do the task himself. Wrecking Ball is a daily where they are standing on the platform and will swing a punching bag to knock off their opponents. Wes and Teresa are going into the dome for getting last, and Leroy throws it because he thinks that he will be safe with the rookies going in, without knowing that the plan changed, and Bananas throws it because he doesn't want to send in Leroy himself. Nia sees what is going on as the chance takes place, and she knows that Bananas is going to snake herself and Leroy. Wes and Teresa tells Naya that she's going to get turned on by Jordan, and it's sad for her since she's been trying to rebuild a friendship with him for 2 years, after the nasty fight on Portland. Jordan tells Leroy and Naya that they are going in to send home Wes and Teresa, and Leroy walks off in anger, though Naya still wants to speak to them, where she mentions that the layup should have went home weeks ago, and she sees it as a punk move, though Sarah mentions that they are trying to play to win, where they are all arguing, with Naya mentioning that people tell her that he's been shit-talking her, and Jordan says, in the confessional, not in person, that they would never be friends based on their history, and it's crazy how poorly this aged, and Leroy ushers her away. Jordan, in a speech, mentions that he is sending his friends in Leroy and Naya, so that kind of just contradicts what we were just showing him saying. And she snaps about how Jordan and Sarah are sucking Bananas' dick, and Jordan thinks that Sarah sucks that badly as a partner, and how they beat a bunch of layups to get back into the house. Johnny mentions that she was the dumb one for dropping out of the challenge first. Naya mentions that she will fuck them up in the elimination. Nani jumps in, saying something about how she never claimed to be a champion, and she catches some huge strays about being a cum guzzling slut. And that is Nia's words, and her phrasing of it. Annie gets up, and they have to be separated by everyone in the house. Sarah and Jordan stand firm in their decision, and Jordan mentions in the confessional yet again that Naya is mad that she quit, and Sarah has never quit a challenge. Leroy is trying to speak to Bananas, but Naya gets involved in it, and she gets into an argument with Bananas about beating Scrubs and how she is going to continue being Hurricane Naya. And Bananas feels bad for Leroy about his partner, and he does want him to come back, despite Nia being a terror. Sarah rants about how playing the nice woman card has never gotten her the win, and Bananas mentions that she's making the smart strategic move, and Naya is being emotional. Remember this for the next round, and for the next few seasons, especially pertaining Bananas. Teresa is said that she and Naya have to go against one another since they work the hardest, but she thinks that she can beat Naya. It is the hall brawl, but the men then have to tag the woman after finishing so they can continue, so it's literally continuous, and not two separate rounds. Teresa gets trampled by Naya, and Teresa mentioned recently that she got a bunch of injuries from this that she still has to deal with, and it kind of just revamped her prior injuries as well. But we also see Wes struggle to get up afterwards as his neck hurts after he goes against Leroy. The second round kind of plays the same way that the first round did, and of course Bananas is happy that Wes got trampled. Wes and Teresa are pissed off about the exile twist, but the two of them are better now. I did enjoy Wes and Teresa this season. They didn't really have a toxic dynamic or much history with one another that affected their game, but they weren't a fake pairing either. They played very well when it came to the strategic element of the season, And I do think that they were one of the better teams competitively as well. But they did get very arrogant, and I didn't like the slut shaming that Teresa did in the season. Though I found the change in dynamic with her and Annie to be very fascinating, though it definitely took a weird turn from last season. Outside of late era 2, I think this is the realest that the Bananas and West feud was, but it would get more and more manufactured and annoying as the seasons went on. It does suck that West is the only person out of the entire season who really doesn't get a chance to return in the season that was eliminated, and obviously Teresa is brought back at the very end. Naya feels better now, but still thinks that everyone is a bunch of cowards because they are competitors, and Leroy ends up defending Bananas, as it was Jordan who made the actual decision. They are going to Panama City in the middle of the night for the next daily, but we do see Naya apologizing to Sarah, where Sarah mentions that she took it personally in her first 7 seasons, and Naya goes on an apology train, where she does it to Nanny and Jordan as well, though Jordan doesn't believe it. Anyways, the daily is. Wait, I can't even call it a daily since it's being done in the night, called Don't Let Me Down, where they have to descend down a rope in the building, but then they have to switch with their partner and do it 5 times. The daily is scary as hell, but the person who makes it the furthest wins the daily. Sarah and Jordan wins the daily and decide to nominate Johnny and Nanny, with Naya costing herself and Leroy to get last place. Jordan tells Sarah that they are not going to do it, but Sarah is insistent on the move, so Bananas ends up going in and Jordan changes his mind, where Bananas is shocked because he and Sarah are friends, though he is more than fine with Leroy and Naya being thrown in like a day or two beforehand, and thought that Naya's reaction was too much and Sarah was justified in what she did in that round. Despite all of that, Jordan realizes that Sarah made the right decision, but didn't like how it was done or how it went down. And she is breaking down in tears where he is consoling her, and I believe they're in the elevator in the hotel. So they are all staying at the hotel for the night before relocating to Norway, I believe, for the final. And Naya, for some reason, is taking this very personal, despite her getting last in the challenge. So she was in anyways. Where she goes on and on for Sarah for being fat. She isn't fat, but I guess Naya was referring to Sarah being fat in her childhood, and so she's going that far back to bring Sarah's trauma out. She calls Sarah a coward, ass fake bitch, and she ends up pulling Jordan's pants down, claiming that he has a vagina, and this is just very uncomfortable to watch, as he's demasculating him by calling him a vagina, and the pulling down the pants thing is just weird. Bananas then simultaneously goes in on Sarah for being worse than Wes, and she says that she thinks that he would. Sarah thinks that Bananas would have thrown her in. Leroy tells Naya to calm her ass down, since it is dumb and it doesn't matter since Jordan and Sarah are already in the final, so arguing with them is essentially pointless when they are the ones who have to fight to get to the final. This gets to the point where Naya and Leroy start arguing with one another, and he mentions that she is the reason why they lost and why they are going into elimination. Nanny then goes in on Sarah for being fake and how dumb she was for being happy that Sarah and Jordan won. So essentially, Bananas, Naya, and Nanny are kind of just ganging up on Sarah and Jordan, and it's ironic because those two were fighting with Naya a few days earlier. Anyways, Jay is comforting Sarah. Of course he is, because she brought him to the final, and they're told that they are flying to Norway tomorrow. So that part is done, and they have an 18-hour flight to Norway, and the arguing continues in their new hotel suite, though Naya and Leroy and Nanny and Bananas don't really care because they still have an elimination. Bananas is annoyed with Sarah enjoying her food, which, how dare she enjoy food? Like, we don't all need that to live, so if I'm gonna eat something, I might as well enjoy it. The gall. Anyways, we move on to the cast enjoying the scenery, where Jordan and Sarah are kind of just hanging out by themselves as they travel through the city of Norway that they are in. And they go back to their hotel rooms. Johnny and Nanny refuse to go out in the hotel room as essentially they have a suite, but there's a few rooms in it, and they refuse to go out of the room into the bigger rooms in the suite. as they continue loudly talking shit with Naya and Leroy, and Jordan and Sarah can clearly hear them, especially Naya. Jordan yells back at Naya about how she quits in challenges, so Naya goes outside of the room to argue with Jordan about how she's still here, and Jordan wants her to come back, and she's going to make his life a living hell. And he essentially wants her to be a layup in the final, pretty much. She calls him the FAG word. Jordan obviously doesn't like it, and she grabs him by his crotch and calls it a vagina, where everyone rightfully sees it as a violation, and she did go way too far. Sarah and Jordan are extra careful putting his pants down and touching his crotch. I'll get more into this with Jordan in a little bit. He is claiming that he can't touch her, so she can't touch him, which is interesting, but I'll get more into that a bit later. Naya somehow feels justified in saying the F word since the gays love her, and she has so many friends in the LGBT community. Oh my gosh. He mentions that she used hate speech, and this is just a blatant example of homophobic women who use gay people as props and shields for their horrid behavior. TJ comes in to pull Naya from the game, though they kinda did it quietly. Honestly, Naya went way too far this season at the end, and she really had no control whatsoever, went for the lowest blows, and was just way too emotional. I thought she was entertaining for a lot of the season, though I did not like her slut-shaming tactics, and her volatility made for some good moments. Her interactions with Jordan went too far, and I do see why she was not on the show for like 7 years after this, though that was tied to Jordan and them wanting to help his image, but we'll get there eventually, though apparently she got a call for Bloodlines. She was almost on that season, though she also mentioned that she was put on time out, though she also claimed that she didn't want to return again, so it's kind of just a mess. I do find it hypocritical for Jordan to lecture her about touching him, where he apparently ripped her bra off while they were arguing in the finale of The Reward Portland, but they just didn't air that stuff, and they did stuff like that all the time. Anyways, Nia needed to do a lot of healing for her trauma, and I'm glad she actually did that. We have Bananas and Jay arguing for a bit randomly, and Johnny thinks Jay should shut up, and Jay is tired of Bananas' attitude. Leroy and Johnny are worried about what is going to happen to Leroy, and Bananas doesn't see why Nanny is drinking at the club and partying with Jenna when they're about to go into elimination. They are brought to the elimination area in Norway, and everyone is confused with what is happening since Naya is gone, which Jordan is actually disappointed in since he wanted to crush her in the final. And it might mean that Leroy is DQ'd as well, and it could mean that Johnny and Nani make it to the finals automatically, essentially making Jordan and Sarah's move pointless. Teresa is brought back to the game. Apparently, she literally just landed home before they called her in to replace Naya, and obviously this caused a few days of delay on production. X Battle is the elimination where it is very similar to pole wrestle. Leroy beats Bananas, and we have a competitive duel between Nani and Teresa after their feud this season, but Teresa does beat Nani. I'm not going to say too much towards Bananas and Nani since I already covered them, and we did see them go head to toe with Naya right when they came back, only to be pissed off when they were the recipients of Sarah's betrayal, but the return did make things a bit more interesting and intense throughout the season, so I can't say that the return wasn't interesting and didn't contribute. So they have to jump out of their helicopters into the water and swim to their boats, where they have to use their rowboats. Leroy and Teresa are struggling with the rowboats, and Jordan and Sarah are in the lead, where they have to rearrange the routes that has letters on them. And at some point before the first checkpoint, Leroy and Teresa gain a lead over Jenna and Jay, who are now in third, where Leroy and Teresa were initially third. They then have to drink one full glass of whatever the hell is in the drink. I don't even know what it is. Jenna and Jay time out on the mind games checkpoint, and then they get to drinking where they both refuse to drink it after a while. This causes for TJ to kick them out, and they are automatically eliminated, where they are not getting paid third. Honestly, I don't have much to say about Jenna and Jay this season. Everyone definitely saw them as layups, but despite that, they never got last in a daily and won. Jenna did start her showmance with her eventual husband and father of her children, Zach, and Jay had a showmance of revenge with Jonay. This is only the start for Jenna, though she was one of the less notable rookie women on the season, in my opinion, and it seemed like Jay would forever be a one-season wonder joke, but he did, I guess, redeem himself on All Stars 4, so props to him. So the rest of the final involves them drinking whatever the hell it is while having to sink rocks into a hole, and they kind of run out of time with the 30 minutes time span. They then have to ride their bike to the rest stop where they have to either be in bed or by the fire, meaning that it is a 2-day final. Sarah speaks to Jordan about how she was always doubted and the horrible stuff people said to her, so she was 200 pounds at one point. And Jordan talks more about his disability, so again, this was clearly another hint at their winner's edit. Teresa and Leroy are literally arguing about Wes and bananas and their antics throughout the season, where Teresa mentions that Leroy refuses to get into the alliances and politics, and he mentions that he just wins, which shows Leroy's mentality, which he admitted recently on Zach's podcast, if I remember correctly. They then have to climb the mountain, and Jordan and Sarah start with a 30-minute lead, and they, of course, win the season. I don't have much to say about Teresa since she literally only came back for the final and wasn't booted long ago, but I did find her dynamic with Leroy interesting here. It is a shame that she stopped after the season until a brief comeback on Double Agents, which only happened due to COVID, though I think she got married and pregnant around here. I do think this is Leroy's strongest season from a performance and character point of view, especially coming off a few underwhelming seasons, at least up until this point in his career. His dynamics with Nia were pretty entertaining with how they hyped up one another, or how much they hyped up one another, and how they differed gameplay-wise. I was definitely proud of him this season. Sarah finally broke her streak of bad luck, with getting pulled on 2 seasons due to nothing of her own doing, and was able to pull out a win, though it was very telegraphed in the edit. She played a lot more cutthroat and strategically this season, though I definitely got some quote-unquote ruined Sarah vibe from her with her behavior, though her issues with Jordan were nowhere near as bad as the other couples. I found her more fun this season compared to the others, though I think she was less of a pick-me here as well, though she would face the consequences for this season in her final one, which we will definitely get into. Jordan was very tough to watch at moments, especially with his women are inferior talk, but I did enjoy his fights with people like Wes, Sarah, and Nia before things went too far with Nia. He learned from free agents regarding unwarranted arrogance and actually putting that work into getting his first win. And he will take time off, which is another thing that I do appreciate and respect about Jordan. I do think he's hypocritical at times with the Nia stuff, when it has since been exposed that he has done the same stuff to her. So he was kind of just being an outright hypocrite and full of shit. So we have another reunion for me to talk about, which is so refreshing. After the first 2 eras, having the reunions not being uploaded on streaming sites or other avenues. And there's automatic tension between Nia and Sarah, since Sarah kind of like throws it in Nia's face for doubting her, and Nia mentions how Sarah rehearsed that line several times. Clearly, Sarah also justifies the decision to cut bananas, and he ends up cutting her off for claiming that they hung out for the entire season and even were friends outside the house and pre-gamed together, but she claims that she has an issue with things that he did on a personal level, which he thinks is hypocritical due to what I just mentioned. Nia comes in mentioning that she and Johnny have an over 8-year friendship, and she, i.e. Sarah, considered him a brother, so she just found it weird, despite them having this relationship for 8 years, and brothers act like Johnny and Leroy. So, Bananas and Sarah continue going at it and arguing, as she mentions that it is a game show, not real life. Johnny mentions that she will never win again since she made the shadiest move ever, and it's very ironic with Rivals 3, but we are going to get there for sure. And Nia mentions that Nia is referring to herself, played the game too personally. Sarah did recently get engaged, and she is not inviting Bananas to her wedding. Nani talks about everyone hating her in the season, mainly the women, and she mentions that this is the first season where she had issues with the women, as she's generally a girl's girl, and she blames Teresa. Teresa mentions that she had her own opinion, though she never really explains it, and they're cutting one another off, so things are very tense between them. Nia doesn't give a fuck about that irrelevant bitch Avery, and is shocked that Nia hated her because she thought that they were cool and she didn't realize it until their blow up, but she believes Nia's apology and she thinks Teresa got into Nia's head. Nani thinks that Teresa is a fake ass bitch, and Teresa really doesn't explain herself well at all, but she doesn't feel bad for anything she did. Naya was told that all of the women, including Nani, were dogging her out behind her back last season, so she wanted to give Nani some karma. And honestly, that's pretty much. It's very lame on Naya's part, I definitely have to admit. Naya's behavior is discussed where she couldn't control her emotions and mentions friendship, but people like Sarah, Zach, and Jordan cut her off while she is literally explaining herself, which was definitely annoying. Johnny tries to defend Nia, but then Jordan cuts her off and cuts Bananas off as well, and mentions that the words Naya used took him back. Take notice that during this entire situation, he didn't really mention the actions of her touching him, since he did the same thing to her, so it kind of shows that Jordan really didn't care about that element of it. Leroy does call Jordan out for his awful comment about the woman in the season, and I'm glad that he brought this up. And Jordan mentions that he doesn't cut people like that, which, and he doesn't explain himself with that whatsoever. He kind of just diverted the topic. And they both agree that Nia did take ownership for touching him. They then agreed that they were friends at some point, despite his denial on the show, though they might have actually hooked up before this from what I read, but I don't know about that for sure. And we all know that they become lifelong friends shortly after this, and they are very close now, but we will get there when we get there. We move on to Zach and Jonay and their dysfunction. Honestly, Johnny and Avery and Adam and Brittany should have been on this reunion since they also had dysfunction on their teams and they made it halfway through the season. But this was before they invited most of the cast to their reunions, which really started during Dirty 30 and carried on throughout Era 4. Anyways, back to Zach and Jonay. So, he mentions that they didn't speak for 3 years and it was hard to work with someone that he couldn't stand, and she doesn't get why he treated her like that. And she even cut off Nani from trying to defend her, which was actually shocking, but I guess she wanted to speak up for herself. Zach does apologize, but he does try to rationalize it by saying that Jonay caused a lot of tension/drama once he got with Jenna, and he thinks that she was jealous. And he also caught her eavesdropping in guy talk. So essentially, he kind of just somewhat took back his apology by trying to justify it. It's kind of like an I'm sorry, but situation. The whole misogynistic rant comes up, and Zach mentions that what he meant to say was that men are better athletes than women. And Jordan doesn't even have anything to say. Honestly, this is another reason why Johnny Riley should have been at the reunion, especially for this discussion. Honestly, I think when it comes to this specific situation, I do think Jordan comes off looking worse than Zach. Obviously, Zach is still awful. He actually did explain his comments and he took the heat for his comments while Jordan just tried to deflect, and minimize, and acted like he didn't really do anything. So that annoyed me a lot. Jay calls out Jenna for having a boyfriend while hooking up with Zach during the season, but supposedly the boyfriend cheated on her. And apparently this boyfriend was on some reality show before the season, or at least from what Jenna is trying to explain, and after that, she did what she did with Zach. Anyways, Zach and Jenna are together at this point, and we will watch that mess play out in their future seasons. Jay's flop performance is talked about in the final, and he really has no excuse, and Johnny takes his pot shot at Jay. And I'm honestly kind of shocked at how much Johnny dislikes Jay in the season. Essentially, he says that Jay doesn't belong in the finals, and he will not have lasted throughout 99% of the eliminations. And even Naya says that Jay deserves to be a one-season wonder. West's mastermind game is getting discussed, and everyone gives him props for the game he played, and Bananas calls West out for making too many promises that he can never fulfill. Jonay also cuts in to mention that she's also a bad communicator, so she doesn't blame Zach 100%. And then they all give their props to Knight and DM, and Zach mentions that he spoke to Knight the night before he left this earth, and he's really tearing up, and Zach went to his funeral, and they kind of just end the reunion there. Alrighty, so now it's time for me to talk about my concluding thoughts on this season, and it's crazy that this review at this point is like an hour and 20 minutes long, so it's definitely my longest one thus far, which is usually a good thing when I have longer reviews, especially when it comes to a season that has a similar episode length than the seasons around it, but I have a lot more to say about this one, especially compared to like last season or even the season before. So that means I really, really, really like the season. Obviously, the XL format was just a bit messy, but I think they pulled it off pretty well here, despite them not really showing it on the actual show. Though I do think it started the unfortunate trend of the cliffhangers, which we started seeing during the second half of this era, and a bit in the earlier seasons of the next era. I also have to add in that it's crazy that this review is this long, since the episodes in this season aren't 90 minutes, which would be something that starts in Era 4, and it's not like this season is a 14 episode season or a 19 episode season. So it just means I had a lot to say. I do think the casting was pretty strong throughout the season, though when you look at the rookies, not many of them made a huge mark outside of like Jenna, and I guess people like Avery and Jay are kind of reviving themselves currently as I'm recording this. The vets were definitely very stacked, and I think that the Exes brought up. I don't know if the best is the worst word for it, since some of the dynamics were very toxic, but there are a lot of stakes within this season, just from the dynamics between the individual pairs and the pairs interacting with one another, which is something that I didn't feel like was a thing during the last battle of the Exes. I know a lot of fans consider season 19 to season 26, which is this season, to be the prime of the challenge. And I definitely do agree with that, since I do think highly of a lot of the seasons, though there are a few here and there that I just didn't care for. And a part of me is kind of disappointed that I am reaching the point where the seasons are nowhere near as good. A lot of the formats are getting very, very sloppy, and the casting wasn't the strongest, or they are focusing too much on the drama factor. But that's definitely something that will be interesting to point out. And this is where there are already only like 1 to 2 more real-world seasons left, and with Are You the One being introduced, they are figure out which ones from that show were meant to be the challenge legends and the ones that have longevity. They just didn't get that with the Are You the One crop this season. Overall, I definitely did like the format of the last place person going in, the power couple choosing the other one to go in, and I really like that there's so much political strategic gameplay in this season. Overall, it is definitely one of my top seasons, despite some of the sadness with the 2 deaths with the cast members. And I think this is one of the seasons where my opinion on it jumped the highest, so that's very good. So that is my opinion on the season, and I'm definitely looking forward to finishing Era 3. I don't know if I'm going to finish all the seasons before I get to 40, so that's kind of a goal that I'm hoping for, but we will see how that goes. Thank you all for watching, and I'll be back with more content soon. Bye!